The Galactic Council chamber was the largest room Yuna had ever seen. It stretched so far that the walls disappeared into shadow. Floating platforms held delegations from 100 different worlds. Some creatures had scales. Some had feathers. Some looked like nothing she could describe. All of them had come here to witness humanity's request for membership in the galactic community. Yuna stood on the small platform assigned to Earth's delegation. She wore a simple black suit. Her hair was pulled back tight. Behind her stood Admiral Taiho and 3 other officers in formal military dress. They had traveled for 6 months to reach this place. 6 months in a ship that the other species would consider primitive. But they had made it. Humanity had finally reached the stars, and now they were asking for a seat at the table. The chamber fell quiet as the speaker, a tall being with silver skin and no eyes, raised one long arm. The delegation from Earth may present their petition. Yuna stepped forward. Her heart was beating fast, but her voice was calm. She had practiced this speech 1,000 times. Honored members of the Galactic Council, humanity comes before you today not as conquerors, but as neighbors. We have watched the stars since our earliest days. We have dreamed of this moment for thousands of years. We ask only for the chance to learn from you, to trade with you, and to stand beside you as equals. She paused, looking around at the assembled delegations. Some seemed curious. Others seemed bored. A few looked at her with something that might have been pity. We know that we are young, she continued. We know that our technology is limited compared to yours. But we believe that what we lack in advancement, we make up for in determination. We have survived ice ages, plagues, and wars. We have pulled ourselves from the edge of extinction more times than we can count. We are survivors, and we believe we have much to offer this council. For a moment there was silence. Then a sound echoed through the chamber. Laughter. Deep, rumbling laughter that seemed to shake the air itself. Yuna turned toward the source. On a platform 3 times the size of Earth's, a massive creature was rising to his feet. He stood nearly 3 meters tall. His skin was dark red, like dried blood. He had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on his broad face. His arms were thick with muscle, and his hands ended in claws that looked sharp enough to cut steel dot. This was Warlord Torvik of the Bren Empire. "Forgive me," Torvik said. Though his tone made it clear, he was not sorry at all. "I could not help myself. These creatures stand before us and speak of equality. These soft little animals who crawled out of their gravity, well, barely 2 centuries ago." He stepped to the edge of his platform, looking down at Yuna with all 4 of his eyes. "I have conquered 17 worlds. I have crushed species that had been sailing the stars for 10,000 years. And now this female from a backwater planet asked to stand beside us." Some of the other delegations shifted uncomfortably. A few made sounds that might have been agreement. No one spoke in humanity's defense. Torvik spread his arms wide. "Look at them. They are small. They are weak. Their bodies break easily. Their lives are so short that by the time they learn anything useful, they are already dying. They fight among themselves constantly. They cannot even agree on how to rule their own world." He pointed one clawed finger at Yuna. "And you dare to ask for membership? You dare to speak to us as equals?" Yuna did not flinch. She did not step back. She met his gaze and said nothing. "I will give you our answer," Torvik continued. "Not the Council's answer. My answer. In 14 days, my fleet will arrive at your pathetic world. You will have a choice then. Kneel and serve the Bren Empire as slaves. Or burn." A murmur ran through the chamber. The speaker raised a hand. "Warlord Torvik, this is highly irregular. The Council has not authorized any military action against Earth." Torvik turned his gaze to the speaker. "The Council has not forbidden it either. Earth is not a member. They have no protection here. They are nothing. He looked back at Yuna. They are vermin. And the Bren do not share the stars with vermin. Yuna felt Taiho's hand on her shoulder. A warning. A reminder to stay calm. She took a slow breath. "Warlord Torvik," she said, her voice still steady. "You have made your position clear. May I make one request?" Torvik tilted his head, amused. "The vermin wishes to bargain? How entertaining. Speak. I ask that when your fleet arrives at Earth, you come yourself. I want you to see us with your own eyes. I want you to remember this moment when you stand in our sky." For a second, something flickered in Torvik's eyes. Then he laughed again. "Brave words from a creature who will be dead in 2 weeks. Very well, I will be there. I want to watch your world burn." The speaker called for order, but the session was effectively over. The other delegations were already leaving, unwilling to get involved in what they saw as a lost cause. Some of them looked at the human delegation with pity. Others did not look at all. As Yuna led her people out of the chamber, a small creature with blue fur approached her. It was the delegate from a species called the Ven, one of the oldest members of the council. "I am sorry," the Ven delegate said quietly. "Your species seems admirable, but you cannot defeat the Bren. No one can. Perhaps if you surrender quickly, he will show mercy." Yuna looked at the small creature. "Has he ever shown mercy before?" The Ven delegate said nothing. That was answer enough. On the long walk back to their ship, Taiho finally spoke. "That could have gone better." Yuna almost smiled. "Almost. He gave us exactly what we needed." Taiho frowned. "A death sentence?" "Information," Yuna said. "He told us his timeline. He told us he's coming personally. He told us he thinks we're weak." She stopped and turned to face her admiral. "Every army that has ever underestimated an enemy has paid for that mistake. The Bren have conquered 17 worlds because no one has ever truly fought back. They don't know what a real fight looks like. And we do?" Yuna started walking again. "We've been fighting since we climbed down from the trees. We fought ice and fire and plague in each other. We've destroyed ourselves and rebuilt ourselves more times than any species in this galaxy. The Bren think that makes us weak." She shook her head. "It makes us experienced." When they reached their ship, Yuna sent a message to Earth. It was short and simple. "The Bren are coming. 14 days. Begin preparations." Then she sat in her cabin and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, 3,000 warships were preparing to destroy her world. The greatest military force in the known galaxy was about to descend on a species that most of the universe considered barely civilized. She thought about her parents back in Bizan, her sister in Seoul, her niece who had just started school, all of them looking up at the same stars, not knowing what was coming. "We don't kneel," she said to the empty room. "We never have. And we're not going to start now." 14 days. It wasn't much time, but humanity had survived with less. They had rebuilt from worse. And if the Bren wanted a fight, then Earth would give them one. Yuna closed her eyes and began to plan. The news reached Earth like a wave. First the governments knew, then the military, then the media, and finally everyone else. An alien fleet was coming. 3,000 warships. 14 days. Surrender or die. For the first few hours, there was panic. People ran to stores and emptied the shelves. Traffic jammed the highways leading out of major cities. Some people hid in basements. Some people prayed. Some people simply sat and stared at their screens, unable to believe what they were seeing. But then something changed in Seoul. Fleet Admiral Hyunsu called an emergency meeting of the Unified Military Command. Representatives from every nation sat around a massive table. These were people who had spent their careers preparing to fight each other. Now they sat together, looking at the same enemy. "We have 300 combat-ready ships," Hyun-soo said. His voice was calm, but everyone could see the tension in his shoulders. "The Bren have 3,000. Their ships are larger, faster, and better armed. By every measure, we should lose this war." He paused and looked around the table. "But we are not going to lose." A general from the European Union leaned forward. "Admiral, with respect, how can you say that?" "The math is simple. They outnumber us 10 to 1. "The math is simple," Hyun-soo agreed. "But war is not math. War is about will. It is about sacrifice. It is about doing what your enemy believes is impossible." He pressed a button and a holographic display appeared above the table. The Bren have never fought a species that refused to surrender. Every world they have conquered gave up when they saw the size of the fleet. They have never faced true resistance. He pointed to the display. "We are going to give them something they have never seen before." The plan was desperate. It was dangerous. It required every resource humanity had. But as Hyun-soo explained it, the people around the table began to nod. They began to see possibilities where before they had only seen doom dot across the planet. Humanity began to prepare dot in orbit around Earth. Captain Sujin took command of the retrofit operations. Civilian ships were being converted into weapons of war. Cargo vessels were fitted with missile launchers. Mining ships were equipped with railguns. Passenger cruisers became carriers for fighter craft. It was ugly work. These ships were never meant for combat. But they were what humanity had, and humanity would use them. Sujin worked without sleep for 3 days straight. She walked through the shipyards, checking every weld, every circuit, every weapon mount. Her engineers followed her, their faces gray with exhaustion, but their hands steady. "Captain," one of them said, a young woman named Hana, "some of the crews are asking questions. They want to know if we can really win this." Sujin stopped and turned to face her. "What do you think?" Hana hesitated. "I think we have to try, whether we win or not." Sujin nodded slowly. "That is the right answer. Tell the crews this. We are not fighting to win. We are fighting to make them pay for every kilometer they take. We are fighting so that if they destroy us, they will be too weak to destroy anyone else. We are fighting because that is what humans do." On the surface, Commander Jiwoo coordinated the intelligence effort. Her team had been studying the Bren for months, ever since first contact. They knew their tactics. They knew their weaknesses. And they had been placing surveillance drones throughout the solar system, waiting for exactly this moment. "Their shields are powerful," Jiwoo explained to the gathered commanders. "But they recharge slowly. If we hit them fast and hard, then pull back before they can respond, we can drain their defenses over time. They expect us to stand and fight. We are going to run circles around them instead." Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a facility that officially did not exist, Dr. Min-jae stared at his creation. Project Horizon. A device that could create an artificial gravity well, pulling everything within its range into a single point. It was the most powerful weapon humanity had ever built. And the most dangerous. "If we use this wrong," Min-jae said to his team, "we could destroy ourselves along with them." His assistant, a quiet man named Dong-yoon, looked at the device. "And if we don't use it at all, then we definitely die." Min-jae shook his head. "I built this thing hoping we would never need it. I prayed that it would stay buried down here forever. But if it can save Earth, then we have to be ready." He gave the order to begin final preparations. The device would be ready in 12 days. Just in time. If everything went according to plan. Across Earth, ordinary people found their own ways to help. Factories that had been making cars started making ammunition. Schools became shelters. Doctors prepared for casualties that might number in the millions. Farmers harvested their crops early, filling storage facilities with food that might need to last for years. And everywhere, people said goodbye. Just in case. In Bizen, Yuna's mother lit candles at a small shrine and prayed for her daughter's safe return. In Daegu, Taiho's wife held their children close and told them that their father was a hero. In Incheon, a pilot named Yoonbi recorded a message for her daughter, telling her to be brave, telling her that she loved her, telling her to look at the stars and remember. On the 7th day, Yuna's ship arrived back on Earth. She had pushed the engines beyond their limits, shaving 2 days off the journey. She walked into the command center in Seoul and found Hyun-soo waiting for her. "Ambassador," he said. "Welcome home, Admiral." She looked at the displays showing the positions of Earth's fleet. "Are we ready?" "As ready as we can be." He handed her a tablet showing the deployment plan. "Your job now is to keep the civilian population calm. Make speeches. Give interviews. Make people believe we can win this. Can we?" Hyun-soo was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. But I know that we have to try. And I know that the Bren have never faced anything like us." He looked out the window at the night sky. "They think we are vermin. They think we will break. They are wrong." Far away, at the edge of the solar system, Torvik's armada dropped out of hyperspace. 3,000 ships, arranged in perfect formation. The largest fleet the Bren had ever assembled for a single conquest. Torvik stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the distant point of light that was Earth's sun. He felt nothing but contempt. This would be easy. This would be quick. And when it was over, he would add another world to his collection. He did not notice the small drones watching from the darkness. He did not know that his every move was being tracked. He did not suspect that the vermin he planned to crush were already planning his destruction. 14 days, he said to his officers. 14 days, and we will teach these creatures what it means to challenge the Bren. His officers cheered. The fleet moved forward. On Earth, Hyun-soo received the report. The enemy had arrived. The countdown had begun. "All units," he said into the command channel. "This is Fleet Admiral Hyun-soo. The Bren are in our solar system. In 14 days, they will be at our door. But we will not be waiting for them. We will meet them in the dark. We will hurt them in ways they cannot imagine. And when they finally reach Earth, they will find not a world on its knees, but a species that has never learned how to surrender." He paused. "Good luck. Fight well. And remember what we are fighting for." The response came from every ship, every base, every soldier across the planet. A single word, spoken in 100 languages: Earth. The war had begun. The Bren Armada moved through the outer solar system like a wall of death. 3,000 ships in perfect formation, their engines leaving trails of light against the darkness of space. Torvik stood on his bridge and watched the stars pass by. He was bored. "How long until we reach Earth?" he asked. 7 days at current speed, his tactical officer replied. "We will pass through the asteroid belt in 12 hours. Torvik nodded. He had expected the humans to send a delegation, to beg, to offer surrender in exchange for mercy. But there had been nothing. No communication at all. Either they were too stupid to know what was coming, or they were too proud to accept reality. Either way, the result would be the same. "Any sign of their fleet?" he asked. "Nothing, Warlord. Our sensors show no enemy vessels between here and their homeworld." Torvik frowned. That was strange. Even the most primitive species usually tried to defend the outer approaches. Perhaps they are hiding near their planet, hoping that we will not notice their pathetic defenses until it is too late. His officers laughed at that. The idea of humans thinking they could hide anything from Bren sensors was amusing. The fleet continued forward. The hours passed. They entered the asteroid belt. Massive ships weaving between rocks that had floated in darkness for billions of years. And then the darkness exploded. The first human ships came out of nowhere. They had been hiding behind asteroids, their engines cold, their systems silent. Completely invisible until the moment they opened fire. Missiles streaked toward the Bren fleet. Not aimed at the capital ships, but at the smaller escort vessels. The explosions lit up the void like new stars being born. Shields flared. Hulls cracked. Ships died. What is this? Torvik roared. Where did they come from? Before anyone could answer, the human ships were already moving. They dove between the asteroids, using the rocks as cover. Bren gunners tried to track them, but their targeting systems were designed for open space combat, not this kind of chaos. More missiles launched. More ships exploded. A Bren cruiser collided with an asteroid while trying to pursue a human fighter. The impact tore it in half. Return fire, Torvik commanded. Destroy them. The Bren fleet opened up with everything they had. Energy beams carved through space. Missiles launched by the hundreds. But the humans were already gone, slipping back into the darkness between the rocks. When the shooting stopped, Torvik stared at the damage reports. 43 ships destroyed. Another 60 damaged. And they had not killed a single human vessel. Find them, he snarled. Send fighters into the belt. Hunt them down. The fighters launched. Hundreds of them, spreading out among the asteroids. They searched for hours. They found nothing but rocks and silence. Then, as the fighters began to return, they hit the minefield. The humans had seeded the approach corridors with thousands of small explosive devices. The mines were too small for Bren sensors to detect at speed. The first wave of returning fighters flew straight into them. The explosions were small, but there were so many. Fighters disappeared in chains of fire. Pull back. The fighter commander screamed. Pull back. But pulling back meant going deeper into the belt. And there were more humans waiting. Lieutenant Umbi had been hiding for 6 hours. Her fighter was wedged into a gap between 2 asteroids, systems running on minimal power. She had listened to the battle through her sensors. She had watched the Bren fighters scatter in panic. Now she saw her opportunity. All units, she said quietly into her radio. This is Blackwing Leader. They are confused. They are afraid. Let us give them something to really be afraid of. Their squadron emerged from hiding and fell on the scattered Bren fighters like wolves on sheep. The humans flew in perfect coordination, each pilot knowing exactly where the others would be. They cut through the enemy formation, their weapons finding weak points that Bren engineers had never thought to protect. Eun herself accounted for 12 kills in the first 3 minutes. Her fighter danced between enemy ships, too fast and too agile for them to track. She could hear the Bren pilots screaming in their strange language, trying to warn each other, trying to organize a response. Then a Bren cruiser found her squadron. It was one of the ships that had pushed into the belt to support the fighters. Its main guns opened fire. Yumbi saw the beam coming. She threw her fighter into a spin, barely avoiding the blast. The pilot beside her was not so lucky. His ship vanished in a flash of light. Break off, Yumbi ordered. Mission complete. Return to rally point. Her squadron scattered, diving back into the asteroid field. The cruiser tried to follow, but it was too big, too slow. It smashed into a rock and tumbled, its engines firing uselessly as it spun into the darkness. The battle lasted for 3 more hours. Human ships would appear, strike, and vanish before the Bren could respond. Every time Torvik thought he had them trapped, they slipped away. Every time he pushed his ships forward, he lost more of them. Finally, as his fleet cleared the asteroid belt, Torvik called a halt. He stood on his bridge and looked at the final numbers. 400 ships destroyed. Another 200 damaged. Over 50,000 Bren soldiers dead, and they had not even reached Mars yet. Warlord, his tactical officer, said carefully, "Perhaps we should request reinforcements. The humans are more capable than we anticipated." Torvik turned on him with fury in all four of his eyes. "Request reinforcements? Admit to the Empire that I cannot crush a species that discovered fire 10,000 years after we built our first starship." He grabbed the officer by the throat and lifted him off the ground. "We will destroy them. We will burn their world. And we will do it with what we have." He threw the officer to the floor. "Increase speed. I want to reach Earth in 3 days, not 7. Let them try their tricks in open space. We will see how clever they are when there is nowhere left to hide." The fleet moved forward, faster now, leaving the asteroid belt behind. But Torvik could not shake the feeling that he was being watched. That somewhere in the darkness, human eyes were tracking his every move. On one of the surviving surveillance drones, a small camera recorded the Bren fleet's new heading. The data was compressed and sent to Earth in a burst transmission that lasted less than a second. In Seoul, Commander Jiwoo received the message. She read the numbers and allowed herself a small smile. "Phase 1 complete," she reported to Admiral Hyun-soo. 400 confirmed kills. They are accelerating toward the inner system. Hyun-soo nodded. "And our losses? 17 ships. 42 pilots. 42 people who would never see their families again. 42 heroes who had bought humanity a little more time." Hyun-soo closed his eyes for a moment. "Send a message to their families," he said. "Tell them their sacrifice will not be forgotten. And tell the fleet to prepare for Phase 2. In orbit above Earth, Captain Sujin received her orders. The real battle was about to begin. And somewhere in the asteroid belt, floating in a damaged fighter with only an hour of oxygen left, Lieutenant Umbi recorded her final message. "This is Black Wing Leader. My ship is dead. My squadron is scattered. But we hurt them today. We showed them that humanity does not go quietly. Tell my daughter that I flew toward the stars. Tell her that I was not afraid." She smiled as she looked out at the distant sun. "Tell her that I was proud." The oxygen ran out an hour later. But by then, her message had already reached Earth, and her daughter, watching from a shelter in Gwangju, heard her mother's voice one last time. She did not cry. She was too proud for that. Just like her mother had been. The Bren Armada crossed the orbit of Mars like an angry storm. They were faster now, their formation tighter. Torvik had learned from the asteroid belt. He would not be caught off guard again. But the humans were waiting. Earth's fleet met them near the orbit of the moon. 300 ships against over 2,000. It should not have been a battle at all. It should have been a slaughter. Admiral Hyun-soo watched from the command center in Seoul. The holographic display showed every ship, every movement, every death. He had sent these people to die. He knew that most of them would not come back. But it was the only way. "All units," he said into the command channel. "Hold the line as long as you can. Make them pay for every kilometer. And when I give the order to retreat, do not hesitate. Do not look back. Just run." In space, Captain Sujin stood on the bridge of her carrier. Her ship was old, converted from a cargo vessel just 2 weeks ago. The welds were still visible on the hull. The systems were held together with hope and desperation. But her crew was ready. "All fighters launch," she ordered. "Show them what we can do." The fighters poured out of her bays like a swarm of angry insects. They flew straight at the Bren fleet, their weapons blazing. Missiles streaked across the void. Energy beams cut through the darkness. Ships on both sides began to die. The Bren returned fire with overwhelming force. Their capital ships unleashed weapons that could crack moons. Human vessels exploded by the dozens. The void filled with debris and bodies, but the humans did not break. They kept fighting. They kept dying. And with every death, they took a piece of the enemy with them. On the bridge of a destroyer called Indomitable, Commander Jiwoo coordinated the defensive screen. Her ship had been hit 3 times already. Fires burned in 2 compartments. A third of her crew was dead, but she was still fighting. Target their shield generators, she ordered. Concentrate fire on the lead cruisers. If we can slow them down, we buy the fleet more time. Her gunners obeyed. Missiles launched. A Bren cruiser's shields flickered and failed. A second later, the ship exploded as human weapons tore through its unprotected hull. Jiwoo allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. Then another hit rocked her ship, and she was back to fighting for survival. Torvik watched the battle from his flagship at the center of the formation. He had expected the humans to run. He had expected them to see the size of his fleet and surrender. Instead, they were throwing themselves at his ships like they had nothing to lose. Destroy them, he ordered. All ships, focus fire on their carriers. Cut off their fighters. The Bren fleet responded. Massive beams of energy converged on Sujin's carrier. Her shields held for 3 seconds. Then they failed. Sujin felt her ship shudder as the first beam punched through the hull. Alarm screamed. The lights flickered. A console exploded, throwing sparks across the bridge. All hands, abandon ship, she said calmly. Get to the escape pods, now. Her crew ran for the exits. But Sujin stayed at her post. Someone had to keep the ship fighting while the others escaped. Someone had to buy them time. She fired every weapon her dying ship had left. Missiles, railguns, even the maneuvering thrusters turned into improvised weapons. She screamed as fire consumed the bridge around her. And in her final moment, she saw one of her missiles strike a Bren destroyer and tear it apart. Then her ship exploded, and Captain Sujin joined the stars. The battle raged for 3 more hours. Earth's fleet fought with a fury that the Bren had never seen. Every ship that died took enemies with it. Every pilot who fell did so with weapons blazing. The humans retreated slowly, giving ground kilometer by kilometer, but never stopping their fire. Commander Jiwoo's destroyer was finally overwhelmed near the orbit of the moon. She ordered her surviving crew to escape, then overloaded her reactor. The explosion took 2 Bren cruisers with her. By the time the battle ended, Earth's fleet was broken. Of 300 ships, only 47 remained. They fled toward Earth, their hulls scarred, their crews exhausted. But the Bren had paid a terrible price. Torvik looked at the damage reports and could not believe what he was seeing. 800 more ships destroyed. 1,200 total since they entered this system. His armada had been cut by nearly half. This is impossible, he muttered. How can they fight like this? They should have surrendered. They should have begged for mercy. His officers said nothing. They were as shocked as he was. Continue forward, Torvik ordered. Earth is defenseless now. We will end this. The remains of his fleet moved toward the blue planet. Ahead, the surviving human ships had gathered in a tight formation near the moon. They were not running anymore. They were waiting. Admiral Taiho stood on the bridge of the last human carrier. He had taken command after Sujin's death. His ship was held together with emergency patches and willpower. But it was enough. This is Admiral Taiho to all surviving units, he said. We have done what was needed. We have bled them. Now comes the final act. He opened a channel that broadcast to both fleets. His voice echoed in the ears of every human and every Bren in the system. Warlord Torvik, You came to our home to make us kneel. You called us vermin. You thought we would break. You were wrong. On his flagship, Torvik listened with growing anger. We do not break, Taiho continued. We adapt. We endure. And when we have nothing left to lose, we become something you have never faced before. The surviving human ships suddenly scattered in all directions. They moved with desperate speed, fleeing from the Bren formation as fast as their damaged engines could carry them. Torvik frowned. What are they doing? Where are they going? Then he saw it. On the dark side of the moon, something activated. A device that had been hidden there for 3 days, waiting for this exact moment. Project Horizon. The device created a gravity well, an artificial singularity, pulling everything within its range toward a single point. And the Bren fleet was directly in its path. Ships began to slide toward the center of the formation. Engines fired at maximum power, but it was not enough. The gravity was too strong. Vessels collided with each other, their hulls crumpling like paper. Reactors overloaded. Explosions rippled through the trapped fleet. What is this? Torvik screamed. What is this? His flagship groaned as the gravity took hold. Bulkheads buckled. Crew members were thrown from their posts. The ship began to spin, pulled toward the center along with hundreds of others. Torvik grabbed the arms of his command chair and held on. Through the view screen, he saw his armada dying. Ships crashed into each other in massive explosions. Debris swirled in a deadly spiral. The heart of his fleet was being crushed into nothing. No, he whispered. This cannot be. We are the Bren. We are conquerors. We cannot lose to vermin. The gravity well pulsed once more. Then it collapsed. When it was over, 1,800 Bren warships were gone, crushed, destroyed, erased from existence in a matter of minutes. Torvik's flagship had been at the edge of the effect. It survived, barely. But as Torvik looked at what remained of his fleet, he knew the truth. He had lost. On Earth, billions of people watched the battle through satellite feeds. They saw the Bren fleet die. They saw Project Horizon do what seemed impossible. And for a long moment, there was only silence. Then the cheering started. In every city, on every continent, people screamed and cried and hugged each other. They had been told they were vermin. They had been told they would burn. They had proven the galaxy wrong. Admiral Hyun-Soo stood in the command center and allowed himself a single breath of relief. The war was not over. The surviving Bren ships were still dangerous. But the impossible had happened. Humanity had won. He looked at the display showing the scattered remains of both fleets. So many dead. Human and Bren alike. The victory had come at a terrible cost, but it was still a victory. Send a message to all ships, he said. Tell them to stand down and assess damage. And send a message to Earth. He paused. Tell them we are still here. Tell them we survived. In the sky above the blue planet, the stars seemed brighter than ever before. The survivors of Torvik's armada limped back toward Bren space. Of 3,000 ships, fewer than 200 remained. Most of them were damaged. Many would not survive the journey home. Torvik himself never returned. His flagship had been too close to the gravity well. The ship survived the initial collapse, but its reactor had been cracked. 3 hours after the battle ended, it exploded. The warlord who had promised to make humanity kneel died alone in the cold void between worlds. No one mourned him. On Earth, the days after the battle were filled with grief and celebration in equal measure. Memorials were held for the fallen. The names of the dead were read aloud in cities across the planet. Captain Sujin, Commander Jiwoo, Lieutenant Yumbi, thousands more. Heroes who had given everything so that humanity could survive. But there was also joy. The impossible had happened. The greatest military force in the known galaxy had been defeated by a species that most of the universe considered barely civilized. Earth had proven that it would not kneel to anyone. 2 weeks after the battle, Ambassador Yuna returned to the Galactic Council. The chamber was different this time. The delegations that had looked away when Torvik threatened Earth now watched her with new eyes. Some with respect, some with fear, some with something that might have been hope. Yuna walked to the central platform. She wore the same simple black suit she had worn before. Her hair was pulled back in the same style. But there was something different about her now. A weight, a knowledge. She had seen her species face extinction and survive. The speaker raised one long arm. The delegation from Earth may address the council. Yuna stood in silence for a moment, looking around at the assembled beings. Then she spoke. 3 weeks ago, I stood in this chamber and asked for membership in your council. I spoke of dreams and determination. I asked for a chance to prove ourselves. She paused. Warlord Torvik gave us that chance. A murmur ran through the chamber. Some of the delegations shifted uncomfortably. He brought 3,000 warships to our home. He promised to burn our world. He called us vermin. Yuna's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath her words. His fleet never returned. The murmur grew louder. The speaker raised a hand for silence. We are not here to threaten anyone, Yuna continued. We are not here for revenge. We did not start this war. We simply refuse to lose it. She looked directly at the delegations who had watched in silence when Torvik made his threats. We came to you in peace, and one of your members answered with violence. We will not forget that. But we are willing to move forward. She took a breath. Humanity asks once again for membership in this council. Not as conquerors, not as threats, but as neighbors who have proven that we deserve to be here. We have paid for our place among the stars in blood, our own blood and the blood of those who tried to destroy us. The chamber was silent. Grant us membership, Yuna said, or do not. But understand this, whatever you decide, we are here. We will not go away. And if anyone else wishes to test whether humanity breaks, she let the words hang in the air. You are welcome to try. The vote was held that same day. It passed unanimously. In the years that followed, the galaxy learned what the brand had not. Humans did not conquer worlds. They did not enslave other species. But they remembered every slight, every threat, every act of cruelty directed at them. And they were patient. Species that had ignored humanity's plea for help found that human traders were polite but uninterested in favorable terms. Worlds that had cheered for Torvik found that human diplomats had long memories. The council learned that humanity could be the best of friends and the worst of enemies, depending on how they were treated. But for those who showed kindness, humans were generous beyond measure. They shared technology freely. They defended allies without being asked. They built bridges between species that had been enemies for centuries. The small Venn delegate who had expressed sympathy for Yuna became one of humanity's closest allies. And the two species worked together on projects that benefited the entire galaxy. 10 years after the Battle of Luna, a memorial was built in orbit around Earth's moon. It was a simple structure, a ring of metal and stone that floated where so many had died. Every year, on the anniversary of the battle, billions of people across the planet would look up at the sky and remember. Admiral Hyunsu retired to a small farm in Gangwon province. He spent his days growing vegetables and teaching his grandchildren how to fish. Sometimes, in the evenings, he would sit outside and look at the stars. His wife would find him there, tears on his face, remembering the people he had sent to die. She would hold his hand and say nothing, because there was nothing to say. He had done what was needed. The guilt would never leave him. But neither would the pride. Dr. Minjay spent his remaining years making sure that Project Horizon would never need to be used again. He dismantled the device himself, taking it apart piece by piece and scattering the components across the planet. The technology was too dangerous. If it fell into the wrong hands, it could destroy worlds. Better that it be forgotten. Captain Sujin's daughter followed her mother into the fleet. She became the commander of the first human exploration vessel to reach another galaxy. When she stepped out onto an alien world that no human had ever seen, she carried a small photograph of her mother with her. She placed it on the ground beneath unfamiliar stars and whispered a promise. "I made it, Mom. We made it." Lieutenant Yumbi's daughter grew up to be a teacher. Every year, she would tell her students the story of the Battle of Luna. She would tell them about the pilots who flew into impossible odds. She would tell them about her mother's last words. "She said to tell me that she flew toward the stars," she would say. "She said to tell me that she was not afraid." And every year, her students would listen in silence. Some of them would cry, and all of them would understand what it meant to be human. On the anniversary of the battle, the names of the fallen were read aloud in every city on Earth. It took 12 hours to read them all. 12 hours of names. 12 hours of remembering. When the reading was complete, people would gather in the streets and repeat the words that had become humanity's motto. The words that Lieutenant Yumbi had spoken in her final transmission. We flew toward the stars. And the galaxy, watching from afar, understood at last why humanity had survived every challenge it ever faced. They were small. They were short-lived. They fought among themselves. They made mistakes and held grudges, and sometimes did terrible things to each other. But when the darkness came for them, they stood together. When the universe tried to break them, they refused. And when the stars themselves seemed to turn against them, they flew toward them anyway. They were human, and they never, ever gave up. Far across the galaxy, in the ruins of the Bren Empire, the survivors told stories of the species that had destroyed them. They spoke in whispers, as if afraid that the humans might hear. They warned their children never to threaten Earth, never to underestimate the small, short-lived creatures who had done what no one thought possible. And in the council chamber where Torvik had once laughed at humanity, a small plaque was placed on the wall. It contained a single sentence, written in every language known to the galaxy. The warlord mocked humanity. His fleet never returned. It was a warning, a reminder, a promise, and it would hang there for 10,000 years, long after the Bren Empire was forgotten, long after Torvik's name had faded from memory. Humanity was here to stay.